who plied the college girls with free drinks and used terms like pussy with reckless abandon. The local girls had an assortment of scars and bad breath that Rick found intoxicatingly attractive. After a successful night, he would call me the next morning from a nearby trailer park screaming into the phone. These conversations ended with driving directions and the phrase, "before her husband gets home." For me, the electronics saloon was not nearly as much fun as other places I'd been. The electronic saloon, this southern Indiana jewel, was not without its charms, however. Its beer list contained two brands, Budweiser and Coors Light. While your choices were limited, they were priced to sell at 95 cents per aluminum canister. Those who enjoyed the colorful local culture that the electronic saloon provided always came to the same annoying question. The saloon part was self-explanatory, but what did this foul drunken mess have to do with electronics? One night I asked the bouncer and owner about the name. He pointed to a rusting Miss Pac-Man video game sitting in the back of the bar. "What the hell did you want me to call it? The Dumb Fucking Shithead Saloon?" he said. I thought that the Dumb Fucking Shithead Saloon might be a bit more forthcoming, but I just smiled and nodded. I enjoyed the electronic saloon every bit as much as Rick. I was a single college student at the time without children or responsibility. Rick had a live-in girlfriend who probably considered herself more of a wife, and a 2-year-old daughter. Rick's girlfriend, Jessica, was a thin Asian girl that Rick had been dating and impregnating since his senior year at Beech Grove High School. Their relationship was ripe for the afternoon talk shows. Jessica made an impressive victim. She was slight, pretty, a straight-A student, and soft-spoken. In truth, she was more of a street brawler, ruthless, obsessed with winning at any cost, and fanatically determined to beat Rick's overpowering libido into something that would fit nicely into a future suburbia. The results were far from promising. Rick and Jessica broke up weekly. The frequent endings of their relationship was a major event, not only in Rick's life, but in those of friends, family, school officials, social services, federal agencies, and of course local law enforcement. Rick was always the one that ended the relationship. It became painfully obvious within the first week of their ill-fated romance that it was doomed to failure. It was obvious to everyone, that is, except, maybe, Jessica. Her controversial methods of relationship counseling were legendary to all that had spent time with the couple. After one particularly memorable breakup, Jessica made a heartsick 2-hour drive in the middle of the night to Rick's parents' home in Beech Grove, Indiana, armed only with a Louisville Slugger in her dream of winning Rick back. Amazingly, she was successful in her quest, and once the 5 windows mailbox, family cat, and other property had been properly fixed, things were back to normal for the couple. I quickly learned to screen my calls when Rick and Jessica were working things out. As soon as Rick would take his phone off the hook, his friends and family would begin taking messages for him. With dozens of my own romantic relationships behind me, I have yet to experience a breakup as painful to me personally as were Rick and Jessica's frequent romantic tsunamis. I would grope for my phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, knowing what was in store. After a groggy and incoherent hello, I would hear Jessica at the other end of the line. "Hi, Mike, how's it going?" "It's 3 o'clock in the morning." "I know, but I have an important message that you have to get to Rick. I wouldn't call if this weren't an emergency. What do you think? You think I like waking people up in the middle of the night? Maybe Rick should be a little nicer to me, and I wouldn't have to do this kind of thing. Don't blame me. Blame that asshole, Rick Mossberg." "Why don't you call him yourself?" I would ask. "Rick's phone does not seem to be working." "It's not working because of the 55 messages you left on it, you psychopath. It's not working because Rick does not want to talk to you." "I just want you to give Rick a message. Tell him that I love him and that I might be pregnant. Can you tell him that for me? Or are you too big an asshole to care for the unborn life of Rick's child? Jessica was always pregnant when Rick had managed to stay away from her for longer than 2 days. Life-threatening injuries, or any number of other cataclysmic disasters happened with alarming regularity during these intermissions in their relationship. When Jessica made these requests, I knew she was deadly serious. I also knew that whatever choice I made always resulted in the same sleepless consequences. If I walked across the hall to find Rick and deliver Jessica's message, she would call back to find out about Rick's response. To ignore Jessica meant that she would continue to call until I picked up the phone or just unplugged it. In the last year of Rick and Jessica's relationship, after their daughter was born and they were living together, things were particularly bad. Jessica often threatened to call the police, claiming domestic violence when they got into a fight. Indiana has a 24-hour holding period for any claim of domestic violence, whether or not the claim is substantiated. Rick had to factor in this 24-hour holding period any time he wanted to go out for a night on the town. I watched several times as Rick was hauled away by the local sheriff with a smile on his face. Calling the police was a double-edged sword for Jessica. It was an act of desperation, but also gave Rick an additional chance to stay away from her. Jessica would try to recant her claims, but the holding period made this useless. It didn't matter to Rick. He liked going to jail. It was the only time he could get any sleep. A needed sabbatical from Jessica. Rick demanded a well-needed 24-hour vacation, and he reminded the officer that, according to the letter of the law, she called, and he should be held. Before being pushed, handcuffed and smiling, into the back of a squad car, I heard him yell, "Take me to jail. At least the sex will be better." By his senior year, I think that even Rick had had enough of the fights. He finally decided to call it quits, despite a constant barrage of Jessica's personal tragedies, homemade desserts, and trips to the Monroe County Jail. Finally, Jessica forced him over the edge. She would not be defeated, and she spent the entire summer trying to ruin his life, both through conventional means and by trying to destroy his relationship with his daughter. Rick finally decided that something drastic had to be done. In a fit of despair, he left town to stay with family in Kentucky. 2 days later, I received a phone call from Florida. Rick was screaming into the phone, and he sounded happy. "I just got married." "You did what?" I said. It was difficult to hear him over the noise and music in the background. "Got married." "Did what?" "Got married." "To whom?" I asked. Bambi, hey, what's your last name?" "Never mind. It's Bambi Mossberg. I almost forgot," screamed Rick, laughing. "Who's Bambi?" "You'll love her. I met her in a bar, and I knew right away that she was the perfect woman for me. She smells like a beer. How could I go wrong?" The newlyweds made the 24-hour drive back to Indiana the next weekend. The Reverend, Rick's parents, and a few friends planned a wedding reception on the porch of Rick's house to celebrate the couple's arrival. A big-haired Southern gal with immense breasts stepped from the passenger side of Rick's truck. I couldn't help but think that Bambi and Rick's mother were cut from the same cloth. Rick's mom stepped forward to greet her new daughter-in-law. "She's built like a brick shithouse," said Barbara Mossberg, smiling. Bambi stepped forward and introduced herself to her new in-laws. "Anyone got a bud?" I pulled a Budweiser from the cooler. We drank, watched the traffic go by, and listened to Vern.